Proverbs 22:3 and 27:12 both say the same thing. They say, the prudent see danger coming and prepare for it, but fools, they go blindly on and they suffer the consequences. We've got Tommy Waller and David Tice, and we're talking about the electric grid. Are there problems with the electric grid that we're facing?
Yeah, Kevin, we just talked about a few of them, those different threat vectors: physical attack or physical sabotage, cyber attack, electromagnetic pulse or any form of electromagnetic attack, Mother Nature, right, whether terrestrial weather like hurricanes or solar weather, and then we just mentioned supply chain and even irrational government policies. All of those things threaten what is really, it's the lifeblood of modern civilization right now.
What I don't get, all right, climate change, I understand there's science that says that climate change could be catastrophic 10, 20, 30 years down the road. There's science that says that we ought to spend trillions, $100 trillion or more on a green improvement. But this seems 100% certain that if the grid goes down, that people are going to be harmed, maybe 90% passing away. This seems 100% certain that it's going to go down, whether it's just because of the patchwork nature of how it's been built. At some point it's going to have a failure, or there's weather, or there's terrorists come and shoot. Didn't they shoot up some substations and things?
North Carolina.
Yeah, why aren't they dealing with this? Why is the government not pick this up as a significant issue? David?
Well, I think the utilities, don't want to be told what to do, frankly. There's a lot of that. Two, they're worried a little bit about the tenuous nature of the grid, and therefore they don't want to put front-end equipment on the front end. They're worried a little bit about what it might accomplish, even though there's testing.
It's like, we got it set like we want. Don't touch it. It might fall apart.
Sure. Right. Yeah. There's also think tanks that are telling them that the risk is low and we don't have to worry about it.
Why? What's the politics behind this?
Yeah, so it's multidimensional, and we should also really thank those that are in the utility industry that actually are working hard to keep the lights on, right? Because people say, hey, Tommy, thank you for your service in the Marines, which, I appreciate that. There's nothing I ever did in uniform that would actually have anything to do with the day-to-day survival of the American people. The people who are keeping the lights on are keeping us alive. So I think, number one, we need to thank those that are actually doing as best they can.
Is that the line workers, but also some executives and some
are solid, but unfortunately, as an industry, sort of the corporate culture of the industry is one where there's just regulatory capture. You see this in some powerful industries out there, pharmaceuticals in some case. In this case, when the industry wants to do something or doesn't want to do something, they can affect the government policies. And they do successfully affect those government policies. And I'll just give you an example. And I think if we just talked about one threat that we know we cannot deter, you mentioned it earlier, Kevin, which is solar weather. It's 100% certain at some point Earth will be struck by a massive coronal mass ejection from the sun. And what that does is it produces these currents in the Earth's crust, right? And what does electricity want to do? It always wants to find the path of least resistance.
Right, goes to ground. Yeah.
And so what is the path of least resistance? These long transmission lines that span our grid. And so these ground-induced currents...
Because they're made to carry current. That's why it's
right. Yeah, and so so what's attached to those things? Huge transformers. These transformers are necessary to move that voltage over long distances. High voltage, low resistance, right? So when the sun produces that ground-induced current, it senses that and it will shoot up through those transformers and into the grid, right? That's 100% going to happen at some point, and it already has. And to show you just an example about the regulatory capture, when the government sought to establish a standard to protect against it, after the 1989, remember this happened before in Quebec, 1989, transformers catastrophically ruined, and we'll get you some pictures of this as you can see. This is from official testimony to the U.S. Secretary of Energy. After that, the government told the industry to establish a standard for protection against solar weather. And I'm going to show you a graph of what that standard will look like, okay? The real threat is in yellow, orange, and red. And that's various other solar storms that have happened, or in red, that's actually nuclear EMP tests over Kazakhstan by the Russians. This is in Washington, D.C. The green bar is the protection you would get in Washington, D.C. In Texas, it's half that for the ground-induced currents. What this means is the industry had to do nothing, had to take no action whatsoever, and they can abide by this standard. The industry designed the process by which the standards are written to enable them to get away without having to take action. That's regulatory capture. And this truth has been briefed to the U.S. Secretary of Energy.
And that's why we're all at risk.